Welcome to the Family Childcare Experts Insights podcast, where we shine the light on family childcare, the unicorn of the early childhood education field. I'm Patricia Dishler, along with my partner, Donna Fowler, and we are excited to begin this conversation with you. Today's show is going to be a little bit of a grab bag. There's a lot of things on our mind, and so we're going to just dive into them and have one of our back and forth conversations that we are known to have. But before we dive into that, we always start with a little piece called What's on Your Mind? So I'll start with you, Donna. What's on your mind today?
So I think a couple things, Patricia. I had the opportunity to be in New York City this earlier this week and was speaking with the New York DOE, and I happened to run across a family childcare network director who supports over 100 family childcare providers in the city. And it was just amazing to kind of just have a conversation with her to talk about kind of what providers were going through. And one of the biggest things I think she talked about is that just the lack of supports for immigrant family childcare providers, in the fact that she has been able to hire folks who speak like Mandarin and Spanish and quite a few other languages. Yeah, but still some of the lack of resources there to support. Still feeling though she's always invited to the table, under the new deputy chancellor, um, is sitting on the advisory council, which is kind of the first time that's kind of ever happened for them. So super excited by that. So she says they're feeling less like the ugly stepsisters, in New York City, but feels they still have a long way to go. But I think it's exciting, right? It's exciting to see that they are at the table being able to advise the deputy chancellor and chancellor on, how they feel that the city can best include and meet family child care needs in the city, regardless of how diverse those needs are.
Oh,
So
that's
what's
awesome.
on?
It's always good to hear
Yeah,
that they're being invited and they're a part of the equation.
yeah, it was pretty exciting. So what about you? What's on your mind?
I just kind of keep coming back to this American Rescue Plan Act, the stabilization program. I've been kind of following different stories in different states of what's happening with those funds. I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about the worry that a lot of money gets dumped in, but sustainability isn't really thought of. And I know that it was there to, to be that rescue during COVID and to help stabilize our early childhood education system. And that's wonderful that it's happening. But I also know that we are coming across more and more organizations that are just really not sure what to do with it, how to handle it, how to approach, how to include family childcare in that equation. And it's kind of getting passed around a little bit with bites and pieces, getting taken out of it like it always does. I kind of checked into my own state here in Wisconsin, and it looks like there's there's an ask out there for $300 million to really support the early childhood field. It's got bipartisan support, which is a good thing. They're looking for approval from the budget committee, and it's out there to help, raise wages, help with the tuition costs, and we'll see what it does. It's always exciting at the front end when there's money put into our field, but it's watching what happens as it starts to trickle out. And I know one of my concerns in the past here in Wisconsin is that it always seems to flow through one, maybe two organizations going into their overall bucket to continue the work that they're already doing, that it's not necessarily targeted in a way that makes an impact on something new and different and changes the trajectory that we're on. So just curious, gonna watch, see what happens, see if it gets approved, and then who actually gets it and what do they do with it? That's the big question that I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, I think, when I think about that, Patricia, I think what COVID and these funds really brought to light for me is the lack of planning that has been done out there, right? Like, didn't we already have lists of wish lists of if we had, a North Star that we could look to and do for the early childhood field in the future? That we already knew what that would look like. If we could build this out, what would it take to do that? And I feel like the money hit and like we had
Like
no
we're
kind of cat to pull out of the bag, you know what I'm saying? And that
right,
it was just like, okay, we don't know what to do with it. And I mean, I'm with you. I see state after state. It's like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? Oh, we're just going to give people money. Give people money for what? I mean, it's because at the end of the
right,
day, yes, we know, but that people need to be rescued, but we also know that it needs to be done in a thoughtful way that
right.
makes sure that we're impacting people in the way that we need to be. It's kind of fascinating to me. You and I have worked in this field for a very long time, and I was very guilty of this myself, right? If I had an extra 10 or $20 in my budget, as a family child care provider, I was buying the thing I wanted, not necessarily always the thing I needed for the
Right,
family
right,
child care. And so it's like taking a look at it and saying, okay, statewide, if we're using the FICRs to really guide, what is the place in the FICRs that everybody seems to fall short on? How can we make a plan around that and get everybody what they need there, right? And how can
right.
we do training? Again, I think that while COVID was absolutely horrible, I think some good things may have came out of it. But one of the things I think it did was it was like, I, I heard somebody say this the other day, and I thought this is just, I love this saying now, right? When the ocean goes out, you figure out who's naked, right? And I
I
think that
like
we
that.
found, yeah, it is a great, right? And so it's like, and I don't know who to attest that to, but I heard that and I thought, yeah, the ocean went out for a lot of these states in early childhood, and we got to really figure out who was naked in there, right? Who didn't really have plans to really support
Right.
programs. And now they're flailing, and I'm with you in just I'm concerned that we're just going to throw money at the wall and not be
Yeah.
thoughtful about it. I have fears that we're not, this is that time. If we have some money, let's try something new. Stop doing the same old, same old, same old, because I keep
Right.
looking at the numbers of how family child care is declining, and whatever you've been doing hasn't been working. So why not try something new?
Exactly. Exactly. And I understand that the idea with the rescue plan is to, to help everyone keep doing what they were already doing because it got so hard to do that during COVID.
Yep.
But and even if it goes to all that, I'm okay with that. But the fact that we need so much to help us just keep doing what we're doing and coupling that with what you just said, knowing that what we're doing right now isn't enough, isn't working, what does that mean for the future? So let's say we get past the whole ARPA funds getting out there and stuff. What is that going to do for us moving forward? Are there being, like you said, are they coming up with a plan so that they can move forward beyond this? Or are we going to have to keep rescuing? Like, let's get out of that victim rescue mode and let's get proactive here. What is going to make this work? What's going to create a solid system that can make it through anything? And
Well,
we're nowhere close to that yet, but hopefully we'll start having those conversations.
Well, I think what's funny about that, Patricia, is this morning I happened to be taking a one program into another program to visit it. And we were actually visiting a military child care program. And we know from looking at Child Care Aware's state of childcare that the military has always come out on top for their programs, right? And it's
Right.
the way it's designed. And so the program that I took in to visit them, we were actually having that conversation. She was like, "Well, how are you guys funded and so forth?" And I said, "If you think about it, because I was trying to explain to this program, I said they receive federal funds through the Department of Defense. And then families pay on a sliding scale. But because they have this beautiful cushion of these federal dollars that they know is coming in, even though it's
Right.
discretionary, so it might not always be the same exact money every year, it's it's the fact of it's created this system, and it does not that doesn't mean that they didn't suffer during COVID and they're still not at full capacity and so forth. But I keep thinking that at some point in time there has to be a base level that anybody in early care and education gets that then allows for that sliding scale for parents, so that a family, who is at the lower end of the economic scale, pays much less than the person who is the
Right.
family thinking, $500,000 together, right? They
Right.
pay more. And so kind of figuring out that system. And I think that's where we got to get to. And if we're going to be sustainable. And I think that's also what I think came out of a lot of this is we cannot put childcare on the backs of parents anymore,
Right.
because those providers, even who were in the more well-to-do areas, may have done better because those families could still continue to pay for their services, right? But a
Right.
lot of
Right.
times, those families in low income areas, those providers continue to work 24/7 all the time because those family members were essential workers. So
True.
it's not a very equal kind of system. We got to figure it
Yeah.
out.
Lots to be done. That's for sure. All right. Let's move into kind of our main segment. So today we had a lot of different topics that we were listing as potential topics for podcasts. And as we got looking at them, we realized they're not necessarily all individually a full blown podcast, and a lot of them have a lot to do with each other. So I think we're just going to do a grab bag today and kind of throw some out there and see what we're thinking about it. So I guess in some ways this is a what's on your mind full podcast rather than just a segment. So we'll talk about all the different things on our mind. I let's see. So let me grab one up here that I know that you have lots of thoughts on, which is working across the aisle and advocacy that can be for both sides of the aisle. I think in our field we tend to see a lot of advocacy groups that cozy up with the Democrat side of the aisle and feel safe and comfortable having that conversation with that side, but don't really know how to have a conversation when the power switches to the Republican side of the aisle. I've seen it done successfully. Donna, you doing it successfully has taught me a lot over the years. So why don't you share a little bit about that? Because I know you've had a lot of experience when you worked as a lobbyist. Is that correct for the Family Child Care Association of Maryland?
Yeah, so I did spend a lot of time as a lobbyist for the Maryland State Family Child Care Association doing their work. And I think some of the things that always amazed me is that I was one of those people that I went to everybody's fundraiser, right? And I would often show up at the Republican fundraiser and be like, wow, why am I the only person here, right? But it gave me a lot of face time with that
Yeah.
particular person. What I've learned over the years, Patricia, is that everybody cares about issues, right? It's sometimes how you word it and how you carry yourself. I'll never forget this experience. I was on a committee as part of that work with a very, very well respected nonprofit in DC that was having a day on the Hill. And so I decided to go along with them. And this was I could care less what party people come from, right? I'm like, whoever's in power at this point in time is the person I need to be friends with, right? And I need to figure out what's important to them as I begin to have messaging with them. And so we started doing these visits down there on the Hill, and our message, we walked into Democratic offices and we would give our speech, right, and we talk, and everybody's body language was just very relaxed. They were smiling, they were having great conversations. And then I remember we decided to go across the aisle basically into a Republican's office. And I just, being an early childhood educator for so many years, I'm just a great observer. And I observe, that's one of those things I really pay attention to, is body language and so forth like that, because 80% of our communication is actually through body language. It's not verbal. And I just saw
Right.
like the backs stiffen up, right? And I this like oh, we got to go in here, right? Just to say we kind of went in there, but their demeanor changed and their facial expressions changed, and then they went in there with the attitude that this person is going to fight us on early childhood issues, that they don't care about early childhood. And I can remember the conversation being had, and I remember that Republican House member saying the same exact thing that basically the Democrat House person had said. It was stated a little bit differently, but if you had listened to the intent of both of it, it was still the same messaging. And I can remember walking out and how they had been so optimistic about their visit with this Democratic congressperson, and then how pessimistic they were with this. I was like, wait a minute here. It was just the same messaging. And that was just like my first really like trying to swim in the pool with the big boys kind of moment of like, I'm not quite sure I want to
Right.
be a part of the mean girl club kind of thing. And saying, and I think that that really set my tone to say that I don't care if you wear a D, an R, an I, a P. That doesn't matter to me. What
Right.
matters to me is that how do you message, right? And I think way too often sometimes we think of folks on the other side of the aisle from us not caring about the same issues, and I think that's for the furthest from the truth. I think first off we have to get away from generalizations. But I think also sometimes, Patricia, you and I have talked quite a bit about that these folks that are sitting here in these positions, they are not experts in this field. And they need somebody like you going in there and helping them understand the issues. And if you're not
Right.
going in there and helping them understand the issues, then you have nobody but yourself to blame when they vote against your issue, right? Because you have to figure
Right.
out the language that they're speaking.
Yeah. The let's preach to the choir isn't isn't enough. To say I want to go talk to this particular group or these legislators because they get it and they know this is important and they want to do something about it. Okay, they already know. To me, that's the biggest reason to say, okay, well, I'm not going to bother. I have a very little amount of time to spend here at the Capitol meeting legislators. Why would I spend it with people that already agree, that already are on the same page? Why aren't I targeting those that are the tough nut to crack so that I can find out, well, what part of this does speak to them? Is what part of it are they interested in? And I know that, I not only did this with some of the legislative work I did as the here in Wisconsin, but more so, I think, on the ends of in looking for grant money. I used to run the accreditation project for the Wisconsin Family Child Care Association, and I was given advice, oh, go to this group or this group because, this is what's important to them. But I was really curious about, well, who haven't we gone to? Where's the new money out there? That there are philanthropy groups that are looking for causes where we can make the case that this is a good cause. And, one of the examples was that I had come across the Women's Business Association. And I remember sitting with their board and kind of pitching us and the the grant that I wanted to get, and talking from that point of view of the providers being business owners. So it wasn't a conversation about the children and aren't the children sweet and let's make sure the children have high quality care, which is a great conversation to have. And there's a lot of people out there where that's important and they want to talk about the high quality education for early childhood children. But there's other groups out there's so much about our work that encompasses so many different things. We can come at it from different angles. And for me to go in there and to say, do you realize these are business owners? Many of them actually even employ someone, and that they are supporting the workforce to be able to go to work, which we all found out during the pandemic. That was so eye-opening to all of them. I had so many of those board members come up to me afterwards and say, I've never really thought about, my local neighborhood family childcare provider. I just think about how they're kind and caring and they care for our children. I haven't really thought about it from that perspective of this is a business and they're trying to make their business work. And it was so eye-opening. They gave us a wonderful grant and continued it for years. But yeah, I think it's something that in our field, you and I have found nobody wants to say it out loud. Nobody wants the stuff that you and I are talking about right now here. I have never had that open conversation about that with anyone other than you. And that's one of the things that we do want to do in this podcast is start talking about the stuff that nobody ever wants to talk about. Why are we hiding from it?
Right. Stop inviting the friendlies to your party, right? Stop thinking of somebody that this group is my friendlies and this group isn't my friendlies. Everybody's friendly. Just invite
figure
them
out what's important to them, what motivates them, what are their interests.
A lot of times, and it goes to say too, because I often talk about even in our field of early care and education, we get so upset with the fact that sometimes like a principal or an administrator or supervisor, they're not understanding where we're coming from. Well, we're not speaking their language. We're expecting them to speak ours when we need to turn around and say, no, let me speak their language. Let me help them understand how by doing this with children, it's going to help this. Let's just face it. I think also when you face realities is that and we had this conversation recently with a Family Child Care Association, Patricia, the fact is that from the time an elected official is elected, the day they are elected, they start their reelection campaign. That is what they do.
That's their motivator.
That's their motivator. And they start to all, and I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, that's what they go. Right. And so even thinking about looking at, what they ran on, getting in there and becoming friends. And it's not always just become friends with them, right? So I know that when I was down in Annapolis, I made friends with all the secretaries, right? You have to figure out who the gatekeepers were, right? And so, me, I'm an ice hockey gal. I am not a football gal, but you better bet when I was walking into Delegate Love's office, her secretary, Kay, who was a huge Ravens fan, I knew the stats on the Ravens when I walked in, right? And so I would just build these lovely, lovely conversations and relationships with them that then got me into those offices and I showed up at everybody's events and I talked to them, and I didn't come at them as, you're not going to be friendly to this situation. I would say, I understand you care about children. Tell me what it is that you would like to see happen with children in early childhood. So is opening up the conversation with them of saying, I know that you care about this. Tell me what it is you want. And sometimes that would just start that fantastic dialogue that you needed to get where you needed to. And through those relationships, and I have to tell you, I've learned the most magnificent things from folks on both sides of the aisle, legislators who taught me, they said, if you're coming into my office and you're asking for this, I need you to ask for this because I'm going to whittle you back down to here. Because that's what we do. right?
The art of negotiation.
The art of negotiation, right? And so they taught me all of those things. They taught me about it's not coming in with why you should do it. You have to figure out how to speak to why it is that somebody else wouldn't want you to do this. So you always have to be
Right.
looking at what are going to be the naysayers, what, and then how do you answer that,
Well,
right?
how you figure out their point of view, which goes back to what you talked
Yeah.
about in your first story about how you listen. And I think that's something we're not very good at. I think as a field, we like to go out there and say, okay, we know what we're talking about. You need to all listen to us, and this is what children need, and this is what quality should look like, and this is how you should fund it. But how often are we going in and just listening, like talking to a legislator? What are your top priorities? Because there's a very good likelihood that whatever their top priorities are, there's a way to connect it to our field and what we do. Just like how we have identified in our balance report those three wheels: the educator, the business, the personal well-being. We can come at this topic of family childcare from any of those angles. We can talk about it as a business, we can talk about it as an education program, we can talk about it as a personal well-being issue and what those providers are going through working all alone in their programs often, and what that feels like. The family members and the feeling of family members that have children that don't thrive in those big centers with 20 children in a classroom and need that smaller. I did a lot of care during my years of family child care for special needs children, and I can tell you that was something that was so nice for those families to be able to think about, that their child was going to be in this very small setting where they would get that individualized attention that they deserve to get, that they might not get at a different place. And families need to have those kinds of options. So talking about the personal well-being of family members even comes into it, and special needs children, and how we, serve that demographic, in our world. There's just so many different angles that we can take to have them, see where the correlation is between what their motivations are, what they want to see happen legislative wise, and what's happening in our field. There's almost always a connection, but we have to stop and listen first. And I think we need to do a little bit more of that. It's so sad to me when we've come across organizations in states that will say, well, we have, there's a different party in power now, so we're not going to get anything done for the next 3-4 years. So we have to just kind of ride the tide until then. And I don't understand that. What do you mean we're not going to do it? Why? Well, there's so much to do. Maybe you're not going to make a lot of headway in that one thing that you were driving when it was the other party, but that doesn't mean that this party doesn't have something that is also important to our field. They're all important. I mean, which is why we talk about our three wheels so much and the balance between them, because in our field, we tend to advocate just for one instead of all three. And we really need to have a more balanced approach in the way we're designing our systems, the way we do our advocacy work. There's room for all these conversations. We just need to listen to who's interested in which piece of that puzzle.
You're absolutely right. It's getting to know them, having the conversation, and stop saying that person's not going to give me what I need them to give me because they're on that opposite side of the aisle in what I believe in, because that is the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah.
It's you're
And
giving
I
up way
think
before you've even tried.
exactly. And I think I have one more topic we can throw in here. And I think it kind of builds on what we were just talking about, because those conversations aren't going anywhere without data. Why does data matter? I think, Donna, you and I have had this conversation with so many people that they don't know their numbers. And we were recently working with a state association doing some board development, And we kept pushing them. And the analogy we kept using is pretend you're in Shark Tank. And when you're in Shark Tank, what do you got to know? You got to know your numbers. And we were pushing, asking for numbers of what was successful, what was not successful. How do you know by looking at your numbers? And they didn't have the numbers. And this is not unique to that one group we were with. We're seeing this in many different states. Lots of our conversations we have, because we ask questions, and a lot of them, and they're tied to data, we often find that people don't have the data in general. You want to talk a
It's
little bit
they
about
don't
why
even,
data is important?
oh, you know me, I'm the data girl, right?
You're
I
the data
like
gal. You're the data
I,
gal. Yep.
I love data. I often say you're entitled to your own opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts, right?
Love that.
And yep, and facts come from data, right? So if I go out there and I'll say, to a program or whatever, they'll say, well, we need this. Well, how do you know that? Or this isn't working. Well, why didn't it work? What was the data behind it? How you know it not work? I mean, and there's been times, Patricia, where we've gone through this. I always ask states every time I'm in front of them. So how many providers actually start your licensing registration process versus how many actually finish, right? What's that
Right.
data? And I'm always shocked at how many people can't tell me what that data is, because we can't even figure out where the hiccup is in the process if we don't even know the basic data,
Right.
right? And so for me,
And
data
they'll
should
miss.
drive, I was just going to say, data should drive every single decision that we make in this field. That I am, I know we're kind of talking about the data thing, but I have that. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. When you look at like my personality things, for years I used to be upset because like when I would do all those personality tests and everything, it always would come out that I'm not the most empathetic person, right?
That's
And
not true.
that's right. But it's and when you say not the most empathetic, and I'm not saying that I don't care for others' feelings and so forth like that, but I'm not a person that makes decisions based off of feelings. It's just that I have got to have the data in front of me. It's probably why I didn't much enjoy school either, because I was a constant like questioner of everything out there, which can be off-putting to people. I know, to be like that, I've had to learn how to pull that in a little bit.
Just that we not only miss things by not having that data that could be problems, but we also miss the solutions in the data. I'm thinking about, I know we had Kim Tice from the Ohio AUIC as a previous guest recently on our podcast. And one of the things that you and I discovered when we dove into the data, you had found that one little piece where we're looking at how the different agencies across the state have a staff person whose job is to help support family childcare. And when do you want to share a little bit about that? You know what I'm talking about, where you found that the one place where it was very successful, there was a data point no one else saw until you dug out, and I thought it was very important.
Yeah, it was just interesting. So I was kind of looking back 3 years and trying to understand, because they're called SBAs in the state. They're like their resource and referral agencies, and they all collect this data. But I was going from SBA to, because they don't have statewide data. They keep it at like the SBA or the county level. So I was trying to collect all of the data together to just kind of give Kim kind of a clear understanding of kind of the insight of to where what was happening with family childcare in Ohio. And as I began to collect that data, I looked back 3 years to see what was the total number of regular family childcare homes versus family childcare homes versus centers. And I tracked that over a 3 year period of time of whether there was an increase or a decrease. And I did that by SBA. And so as I started digging into the numbers and looking at where were the places that might be stable or where were the places that actually grew, the one place in the state where family child care not only was sustainable for one group, but actually grew for the second group of family child care was a place that the SBA was a former family child care provider. And so my question was to them is that do we have any other data in this state to show that maybe family child care providers are best served by former family child care providers who understand their world? And it doesn't mean that all those other SBA family child care specialists weren't doing good work. I think another thing we uncovered is that a lot of them have just huge
Huge
caseloads.
caseloads.
There is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
no way that they can do their jobs effectively with the number of providers that they have to support. And kudos to them
Right.
for doing the best that they possibly can. But what could we do to help support the my next
Right.
question was is how are we supporting those other SBA specialists, family child care specialists, to really understand family child care, right? Because it was very
Right.
obvious as I called around to figure out. I had asked a lot of them if they had had family child care experience prior to come into they had worked with family child care, but not necessarily been a family child care provider. But the one place
Right.
where the SBA specialist was actually still a family child care provider and a part-time family child care specialist with our SBA was the one place in the state where we saw stability and growth. I find it fascinating. I want to know why.
I do
Why is
too.
that the
I do
case?
too. Yeah, so there's a possible solution there for them, a benefit to finding that information out, that maybe we should be thoughtful in our hires. Do we have any former family child care providers we could put in this position? Or at the very least, like you said, maybe that's saying that we need to provide a better insight to family childcare type training to the staff that we do have, that they build that capacity, because you can learn about it even if you haven't been a family childcare provider. There's, you can certainly learn to understand this field and better support them.
But
But
I think
the
that the
data
thing is, though,
matters, and that
it does.
kind of stuff comes out if you just take the time to dig. But it took a lot of digging. I know, for you to dig into all of that and for us to look at all the data that we got. It's very disjointed, and that's not unique to
Right.
Ohio. Many states that we've been doing data dives in, it's really hard to get that statewide picture. The different things, everybody's got their own little set of data, and it doesn't necessarily line up with what other organizations in the state are collecting. And so trying to find that big picture gets a little bit muddy.
But I have like 25 questions for that, right? It's not just one question for that because
Sure.
we don't know if the secret sauce is because that person was a former family childcare provider or current family childcare provider. We have to figure out
Oh,
what is the
absolutely.
secret. Was it? I mean, that was my question, right? My
Right. We
question
don't know if
was,
it's a
is it
causation or just
the causation,
correlation.
right? And so again, digging into that, and so that's my love, that I love it when we get calls from states and organizations that say we want to do this data dive. It's like it's music to my heart, right? Because
Right,
I
right,
love to look at the numbers and to try to figure out the
right.
questions that we need to be asking. And if we do have the data, right? And so I read
Yeah, yeah,
this great book years and years ago called Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, which really talked about you have to first understand what data you do have to understand what data you don't have to understand what questions you need to ask.
absolutely. Yeah, there's so much that's not even being asked, that we're finding out. And organizations, that the nonprofit associations that we work with, they set these objectives, these strategic goals, But I don't, we're finding more often than not, there's not that real close look at, well, how are we going to track this? What is the data we're going to collect so that we can tell if we were successful, if we're on track or not? And I think we'll probably dive a little bit more into the whole OKRAs that we have embraced now in our board development trainings that we're doing. And but we're really excited about having a system that really helps them drive down to that data issue and, have their numbers, be able to go on Shark Tank. You want to go in front of funders and ask for funding? A funder is same thing as an investor to a business. You have to start thinking like a business. Why would a funder want to put money into what you're doing? What's the return on that dollar going to be? And yeah, it's not going to be them getting monetary profits, but there has to be a return on that. You have to be able to show something changed because of this money, something different happened, something better happened, and that you were already on a trajectory to make it happen. And that money is just going to be the boost to make a bigger impact. I mean, simplified, that's basically what they're looking for when you go on Shark Tank. And I think that's what funders that are looking to support any nonprofit are going to be looking for. They want to, they become philanthropists and they get these foundations and this money and this grant because they want to make a difference in our world. So show them how you're going to make a difference.
It's not
and
even
have
just
the numbers to back it.
It's not even just about that, Patricia. We talk about the money of it and going after funders, but if I'm trying to attract a great board member to my organization that's going to help me get over that, if that new board member, if they're worth their weight in gold, they're all over your social media, your websites and everything, figuring out what it is that you've done, because everybody
Right.
wants to be a part of something great that is happening. And if we aren't clear on our goals and what our goals have been and what we've accomplished and where we're going, we're not attracting the people to the table that we want to. And data just gives us so
Absolutely.
much power to make the case of why it is that we exist and should continue to exist.
Yeah. And I think all of this kind of loops back, maybe as a way to wrap up this podcast conversation, it loops right back to where we started in talking about advocacy and looking at it from different angles. Having data will matter in your advocacy just as much as it matters in your fundraising abilities, and just as much as it matters in looking to gain your board members. Data drives all that stuff, which is why we are so focused and driven by questions, because we need the answers to these questions in order to get the facts and the data that are going to be able to, drive that message. Yep. and make good things happen. So
yeah, we had this conversation just briefly as we tied this up, Patricia.
Yeah.
With a few providers recently, where we talked about, you have to stop going in and talking about me. It's how is right. this going to impact this legislature's entire constituency? And you got to have the right. data to back it up.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you and I could talk about data all night long. I'm sure we'll come back to this again on future podcasts that we have as well. And I think it's a good time for us to wrap up with, what are we reading? What are you reading right now?
So I have been reading the advice. Let me see. It's right here. Grab it. The Advice Trap by one of our favorite authors, Michael Bungay Stanier, which is Be Humble, Stay Curious, and Change the Way You Lead Forever. And of course, I was such a huge fan of his book, The Coaching Habit, but kind of reading through this and just, it's been very interesting to talk about how a lot of times when we're having conversations with someone that we're trying to lead through the change process, that we often give advice, and how we have to pull back. And it's not about us giving advice on what we were doing, but it's more about asking the questions that we need to ask to bring what is important to them to the forefront, to really drive theirs. What worked for me in my program might not work for you, Patricia, in your program, right? But it's my job to come in and say, well, this is the way I did it, right? You'd be successful, you did this. It's more of finding out, well, okay, so tell me a little bit more about that. Let's talk through, what do you think, some solutions. So more kind of collaborative. So that's what really this is about. It's about leaders stopping themselves from giving advice to people, or even a question disguised as advice, right? Have you ever thought
Right.
about, right? That's a question disguised is an advice disguised as a question, right?
Yeah.
Because you're getting ready to say something you did or something like that, right?
Right. Right.
It's okay to say, I can give you a few examples of what I've seen, but you're
Yeah.
not saying, have
Yeah.
you ever thought about, right? And so,
Yeah.
very
I think that
interesting.
goes along with I call them the D questions, the did you, do you, does it? Because those come across, did you do this, or do you think of that? They're basically statements hidden as a question that are saying, I think you should do this, or I think this is the
Exactly.
way it should be, but you hide it in a question, like you were saying. And yeah, so I stay away from those.
Yep. So, getting out of the advice trap is what I'm reading right now, basically. What are
All
you
right.
reading?
Well, I am actually doing a quick reread of The Art to Coaching. I kind of I've got this system down now where I'm putting my books in a row on my shelf, and I add the new ones on the left, and then I also go back and pull the older ones and move them forward. So basically, about once a year, I will reread my favorites. I don't do this with every book, but you and I have our favorites, and I like to churn through those because you find something new. And some of the stuff I'm finding in here that's sticking out goes along with what you were just saying. The about giving advice. One of the statements I highlighted in here, making a mess of my books as I always do, is the coach does not share expert knowledge. They work to build on the client's existing skills, knowledge, and beliefs. So it's not about you coming in and being the know-it-all that gets to tell them what to do. It's about you helping them on that journey of growth and exploration. And one of the things that also is sticking out to me again, because I've had several coaching relationships and jobs recently where I'm being told that when you do practice-based coaching, that it means that the teacher takes it's whatever the teacher wants, like it's this big empty slate. And I'm reading my practice-based coaching book to find those specific quotes that dispel that. But it also talks about it in this book as well, about when we're doing coaching, it's within a perimeter. You're coaching for a purpose. So you identify that bigger purpose, that we're here to implement this behavior or skill for children, or we're here to implement this curriculum or this assessment tool, or to improve our business practices, but you have a kind of overarching goal that everyone is agreed upon. And then, yes, within that, you want to see where the teacher wants to go, but it's still within that. It's not like you can show up and say, hey, I'm here to help coach you on, how to do assessment. And they can go, well, that's great, but I really want to know how to do a St. Patrick's Day craft. And you can go that direction. So understanding just how to balance all of that as a coach, because I think there's a lot of coaches I'm working with, I'm finding out right now, that feel like they're not allowed to guide where that teacher goes at all. And that's simply not true. We're there to help clear a path and
Right.
then show them
Again,
the
yeah.
direction.
Right.
clear
Again,
the
it's about,
path, but you're
yeah.
not walking, you're not pushing, you're not telling them how they have to do this. You're just saying, hey, look down here. Do you want to check it out?
But there's always a goal, right? And the goal should be data space and the
Absolutely.
data that then drives kind of those coaching. I have to tell you, my favorite quote from that book, because I love that book too, is
I
and
know.
I'm
I wanted
probably,
you to share it.
I know I'm probably not going to say this exactly how it's worded in the book. But my favorite quote basically out of that book is that somebody can't learn from you if you think they suck.
You nailed it.
Right. And I think that goes to the heart of it. If you walk into somebody's program and you all in the classroom or whatever it is, and you automatically have this negative view and you think that this person doesn't know anything at all, they can't learn from you. Get off your
Right.
high horse, because that person is probably extremely brilliant. It's just your job to ask the right types of questions to bring it out of them. So,
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's enough for today. There's lots more to come. So I hope that all our great listeners and watchers on YouTube will join us again for future episodes. We'd love to hear what questions you have and what questions you would like us to explore. So please reach out to us on social media. All the social media links are on our website, familychildcareexperts.com. And certainly, please join us on our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the Family Childcare Experts Insights podcast. Keep questioning.